Hello from USC, Connor Morrissette and Chris Trevino in our matching shirts, which we did not plan, coming to you with another edition of Instant Analysis after USC's 11th fall camp practice of 2024, heading into week one against LSU, getting closer and closer, Chris. It's getting a little repetitive for me. We're seeing a lot of the same stuff at practice. I do have some observations, of course. We're hearing from players and coaches who we talked to at Media Day. I'm just ready to see more game action. That game against LSU can't come soon enough. But we did have a really funny moment at the beginning of practice when we were able to watch today, Chris. Anthony Jones, the running backs coach, he was doing some special teams work with the punt returners. Woody Marks was trying to catch a punt from the machine. Jones throws up a pad trying to distract him, drills him in the face, and I'll let you take it from there. You tweeted the video. Hilarious moment.
Yeah, just a simple distraction drill where he's throwing the pad in the air, trying to, mess with the eye line of the guys returning, concentrate on the ball, and just the pad strap got caught in Jones's on the throw, and it just altered the arc of it, and it didn't get any height. Went beeline right for Woody Marks' head, popped him, and then lost sight of the ball. Hit them, bang, bang play. Would have been 15 yards for interfering with the returner. But, yeah, it was a funny moment. Jones looked at us like, please tell me you guys got that on tape. We did. It's up on, online right now. So, yeah, just a little funny moment. Football's serious. Practice is hard work. But, it's a game, and it can be fun a little bit.
It was cartoonish the way that he got hit. That's the best way I can describe it. Really funny. I highly recommend checking it out. I got a big kick out of it, too. Great job recording that, Chris. Let's move on to some more serious stuff, though. So, right guard, we've talked so much about it this offseason. Who's it going to be? Is it going to be Amos Talele, Alani Noah, Gino Quinones, Micah Benuelos? It looks more and more likely that it's going to be Alani Noah. And today, when we were able to watch some of the offensive line drills, Mason Murphy, the starting right tackle, he was working right next to Alani Noah and Jonah Monheim, the starting center. Talele is still out. He's been out for the last few practices. He's the main competitor for Noah, but if you're not able to play, you're not able to compete, of course. Long story short, it looks like it's Alani Noah.
Yeah, and just for the sake of, competition and also, chemistry building, you need to get those guys ready. As you mentioned, LSU, it's coming up, and, what's best for the team, what's best for the offense is getting a guy in there that they can kind of solidify and get that communication across the board. Alani Noah, obviously, still a very, very young player relative to everyone else along the offensive line. Obviously, Elijah Page have been kind of in the same boat. But Alani Noah, still needs to get up to pace with playing with those guys consistently. So, just because Amos is banged up a little bit right now, I feel like that's pushing Noah, as you mentioned, to the forefront because, they need it. They need someone to step up there, and they need to get that line settled quick because Tigers are coming.
They are. Last observation I had from practice, we saw Danton Lynn again move over from his usual early work with the safeties to come over and watch the edge rushers. He's done that consistently the past couple of days. And then at the end, I thought it was interesting, Chris, we saw a drill right before we left where the edges, they dropped back into coverage and they intercepted a pass. Sam Green took the first rep, and then Anthony Lucas worked after that. Any final observations from you? Those were two other interesting tidbits I had.
I think you kind of scared a bunch of USC fans hearing edges dropping into coverage because, not quite the cornerback play we saw Braylon Shelby last year, but you got to jump into coverage sometime. Only observation I have is just watching the DBs and just specifically with Zion Branch, just looks really healthy out there. Just looks completely smooth, fluid. Doug Belk, talked about him a little bit. Maybe we'll talk about him a little bit later, but just looks really healthy. And, I know a lot of USC fans are excited about him, coming off the knee injury. There are times in practice where, in spring when he was kind of moving a little bit, still looked a little hindered by that coming off that knee surgery. But the last times I've seen him in fall camp, so smooth, looks like no ill effects from, coming off 2 knee surgeries. So really excited about Zion Branch. Obviously has to stay healthy, but if he gets up to speed with the defense, he could be a really, really nice piece for Danton Lynn and Doug Belk.
Doug Belk said he looks like the top recruit that USC recruited now, and that is obviously a very good sign. Let's get into Doug Belk, what he had to say after practice. Chris, I was trying. I asked him, what's Jalen Smith's best position? He said, anywhere. I asked him who or how far ahead are DeCarlos Nicholson, John Humphrey, and Jacoby Covington to the rest of the corners. He said everyone is close, and we're still repping 6 to 7 guys for those top 2 corner spots. I keep saying long story short. In sum, he did not really give us a whole lot to work with. He did say ideally in that defensive backfield he'd love to rotate 8 to 10 guys, rotate 6 to 7 cornerbacks. I don't really know how much I believe that. I think Kamari Ramsey and Achille Arnold, they are your safeties. Maybe someone else will rotate in. It looks more and more likely to me that Greedy Vance is the nickel. Maybe Jalen Smith rotates in there. And then I think you have 3 corners for 2 spots on the outside, those 3 guys that I mentioned earlier. So how many guys is that? That would be 6. A long way away from 8 to 10. Got to take him at his word, of course. We'll see if USC rotates 8 to 10. But what were your thoughts on what he had to say? That seems like a lot.
It felt like a O-line, D-line one-on-one. You were trying to get past him, but he was stolen one-on-one, man. He was getting that.
He won the rep.
Yeah, he won the rep, absolutely. But yeah, I mean, not giving too much, not giving anything really. But yeah, I mean, I believe them that they're deep. We know that they have good competitive depth, and they're just trying to build good.
And they do have good competitive depth in the defensive backfield. That's true.
Yeah, that is very true. But I don't believe that there is no set depth chart right now. I feel like they do have their guys that they, Kamari Ramsey, Achille Arnold, Greedy Vance, Jalen Smith, you have Jacoby Covington. Feels like he's a lock for that spot. John Humphrey, it just came back from being fully cleared. He still has the advantage of having played in this defense for him, so I feel like that's a shoo-in for the other spot. I know DeCarlos Nicholson has been getting a ton of reps with Humphrey out, but even then, he's, 1A, 1B, or with that other cornerback spot, he's going to rotate a lot. I feel confident in knowing that those 3 cornerbacks will play a lot. What happens behind them, I still like Prophet Brown, Anthony Beavers, Zion Branch. Those are other guys who are pushing in that second team that played well at the end of last year. As we just mentioned, Zion being healthy. Guys are going to push, 8 to 10. That's a high number, but I would not be surprised if they got a lot of rotation. And maybe not 10, but, 8, yeah, I could see it happening. But I still think they have a pretty good idea what that starting secondary is going to look like.
I agree. They like the guys they like. And Belk, without being asked, brought up Kamari Ramsey and Achille Arnold by name without being asked about them specifically. It just looks more and more likely to me that those guys are going to be the 2 starting safeties. And the big question I have is Jalen Smith, who was really solid last season, and he had such a great Holiday Bowl game performance at deep safety. He missed a lot of the spring. Like, where is he fitting in? He's young. He has a very high upside. I feel like right now he's a little bit of the odd man out, and it'll be interesting to watch how he progresses. One other interesting thing from Belk, he talked about some of the freshmen standing out. They've had a lot of time to evaluate Marcellus Williams, who was here early in spring camp, and then he shouted out Braylon Connolly. We keep hearing good things about Braylon Connolly, who was not here in the spring, but he's here now in the fall at corner. He's looked really good. Even Jamil Muhammad talked about how good he's looked. And then Isaiah Rubin, a guy with position versatility. We saw him work with the Nickels yesterday. Belk shouted him out as well. He said that group of true freshman defensive backs, they can be good here for a long time, and people should be excited about them. Before we transition, Chris, any final Doug Belk thoughts?
No, I think we got all we needed with Doug Belk.
Jamil Muhammad, I had the chance to talk to him, so he mentioned Conley, like I said. A few things I just want to run through. I asked him why is he more confident that Anthony Lucas can have a bigger impact this season than he did last season. He just said he's more locked in, and he does have a lot of confidence in him. I asked him about LSU and competing against those 2 great tackles, Will Campbell, who could be a top 5 pick in the NFL draft, and then Emory Jones, who CBS named a second-team All-American. Campbell was a first-team All-American. Those guys are really good, probably the best tackles USC will face all year, and Jamil Muhammad, he said, we're ready, we're locked in, we're excited for it. That's going to be one of the biggest matchups in that game, Chris. Edge rushers, some guys have been a little bit limited at practice. I know we don't watch LSU week in and week out, but they do have those 2 great tackles. How do you think those edge rushers are going to stand up against those guys?
I mean, when it comes down to it, I know you're talking about the interior of that defensive line for USC and that storyline, can they stop up the middle? But I think the bigger storyline is, can they get pressure on LSU having those 2 great bookends? And arguably they're the best tackles that USC is going to face all season. Your first game in Vegas, your first time playing as an actual defense against an actual opponent, and it's 2 of the best tackles in the country. That's like, you don't get a Utah State to warm up with, get some confidence. You got to go against the best right away. So those edge rushers, Anthony Lucas, Jamil Muhammad, Braylon Shelby, hopefully he's back in time, they need to step up in a major way because the pass rush was inconsistent last season. So if they can get anything out of those guys that first game, that's going to be a big win. But again, it's a tall task going up against, probably the number 1 overall or number 1 offensive tackle taken in this coming draft, and then a guy who's probably also going to be in the first round in Jones. So yeah, it's a huge first test, and I don't envy them having to come against, but those defensive ends have a lot of pressure on them because they need to get something on LSU's quarterback if USC's defense is going to have a chance. Forget about the middle, just getting some pressure on those passing downs is going to be key in Allegiant Stadium.
Muhammad also said he feels like the defense at this point in camp is a lot further ahead than they were last year. Of course, that's an encouraging sign. And trying to get information from the scrimmage that they had over the weekend, it's been like pulling teeth. Lincoln Riley just said the defense played really well, and then Jamil Muhammad said the defense played really well. So I said, who specifically did anything? Any sacks, any picks, any forced fumbles? And he said Prophet Brown had an interception that was eerily similar to the spring game. And if you remember the spring game, Prophet Brown had like a 101-yard touchdown return pick. So it sounds like he had a pick six. He, to me, is the only guy I've heard do well in the scrimmage. We heard the defense overall, but no one by name, so it was just nice to get a name for who did well. Those were the thoughts that I had on Muhammad. You had a chance to talk to Gavin Meyer, the Wyoming transfer on the interior of the defensive line. Chris, what stood out when you spoke with him?
Of course, I asked him about the scrimmage as well.
Yeah, did you get anything?
No, I didn't get any specifics.
What's going on out here?
No, Bear Alexander had 9 sacks, nothing like that. But he was just, in general, takeaways when I asked him when you guys watched the film. He was very happy with their physicality and the way they played with their hands. He also spent a good amount of time talking about the communication was really good between all levels of the defense, not just like among them on the front. He's talking about the cornerbacks, are talking the safeties, are talking the linebackers. All 3 levels, they were communicating really, really well, and that's kind of what perked my ear up, because obviously communication was not a strong suit for USC's defense last year, and that's something they've been harping on this year. So it's nice to see it kind of play out and continue to play out. We saw a little bit of it. Well, not a little bit. I saw great instances of it in the spring game. See that carry through, and a newcomer like Gavin Meyer kind of point that out for him to stand out like, oh, the communication here is on point. Obviously, that has to translate to Saturdays, very different from practice. But yeah, that's kind of what we talked about. And, he talked about the similarities between the Wyoming defense he was leaving to this USC defense. So he feels familiarity in this defense, even though he's just joining. He's only been learning in the playbook. Now he's on the field, actually, getting his hands in there with the defense. But he's not as far back as you would think. He seemed competent that he knows what's going on with the defense just coming from Wyoming. So he was very familiar with what was going on. He was very excited to be in a defense that he feels like he already knows.
We heard a lot of really great things about Gavin Meyer from Lincoln Riley yesterday, and just talking to people around the program, it seems like he's made an impression, and maybe he's locked down a starting spot next to Bear Alexander. Too soon probably to say that definitively. He's going to play a lot, though. I think that is something we can say definitively.
Yeah, they need him. Yeah. Obviously there's not a lot of experienced defensive tackles on this team. There's some guys that are hoping to step up. Devin Tompkins, Elijah Hughes, guys like that. But Meyer has experience, and he has some nose tackle experience, and he's big, not quite 320 pounds, but he brings size. And yeah, I think they're going to have to lean on him to give them, at worst, dependable rotational depth that they can use. Is he going to be a starter? We don't know. Kobe Pepe's still there, but Gavin Meyer, I think, will get some starts this year. But again, at worst, he's going to be part of the rotation. I think he's going to have to play a bunch of reps.
You mentioned Devin Tompkins there. Jamil Muhammad shouted him out as well. I forgot about that. I asked him, outside of that top group with you, Anthony Lucas, Braylon Shelby, and Cameron Fountain, who else is standing out? And he said Devin Tompkins. So he's a guy who, if you go by the roster weights, he added the most weight of anyone in the program, 30 pounds. He was 255 last fall. He's now 285. He was always going to be a developmental piece. That's now his third year at USC, so the time might be now for him. I think in the future, I'm excited to just reach out to some coaches and talk to people about Tompkins, because I feel like he could have a role. I think those were the only people we spoke to today, though, Chris, right? Ryan had Greedy Vance. Not a ton today. We were supposed to get Eric Henderson and Bear Alexander. That didn't end up happening. So hopefully in the future we'll be able to speak with them, because whenever you get Coach Henney, it's very interesting to pick his brain. He's Chris Trevino. I'm Connor Morrissette. We'll be back with instant analysis tomorrow from the 12th practice of fall camp. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you then.